despite what you hear from the Biden administration, the economy is not doing great. Like, the thing that I look at time and time again are the numbers that come out on people living paycheck to paycheck, people who can't afford a $500, $1,000 emergency. Those numbers are always devastating when you look at those. Now, it's true that the stock market is doing well and the unemployment rate is low. But for the stock market doing well, that's more of a reflection of how the top 10% or maybe 20% of the country is doing. And the unemployment rate being low, yeah, that's good, but a lot of those jobs are like shitty gig economy jobs, and how many people are working 2 jobs or 3 jobs, or how many people are underemployed, right? Like those facts kind of leave out that angle to it, which is kind of misleading. So to me, it's like, you see the 60 to 70% of Americans living paycheck to paycheck, some gargantuan number can't afford a $500 emergency. Things are not as great as they're pretending that they are. Okay, let's just say that. Well, Judd Legum wrote a phenomenal piece here on his site, Popular Information, and it dives into really the core of the problem here. One of the persistent problems that people keep talking about is inflation, right? Like, oh, when I go to the grocery store, I'm paying way more than I used to, and I don't like that, and that's hurting my wallet or my pocketbook or whatever. He lays out how we got here. Look at this. Corporate profit bonanza. In the last 3 months of 2023, after-tax corporate profits reached an all-time high of $2.8 trillion. This is part of a long-term growth in corporate profits that began in the 1980s, picked up steam at the turn of the millennium, and exploded since 2020. So remember, there is inflation, and they argue, oh God, bro, we got to raise the prices, bro. We got no choice, bro. Well, Judd Legum just told you, after-tax corporate profits are at an all-time high. It's not like they have these tiny profit margins and hey, there's inflation, we have to raise the prices to keep our tiny profit margin. All-time high corporate profits. Okay, let's continue. Look at the chart. Look at the chart. Corporate profits after tax. Look at this. 1970s, 1980s, 1990s, and then... So they say it really started with Reagan, but then massive uptick in the George W. Bush years, and then the crash with the Great Recession. And then boom, after the Great Recession, just total skyrocket job under a little bit under Obama, under Trump, and now under Biden. Look at this chart. This corporate profits chart is absurd. So here's what he says. Notably, the surge in corporate profits since 2020 has been fueled in part by expanding corporate profit margins. Last year, corporate profit margins, excluding the financial sector, were over 15%, a level not seen since the 1950s. This is because the increases in prices for goods and services have outpaced the increase in costs, both labor and non-labor, for corporations. According to an analysis from the Groundwork Collaborative, corporate profits drove 53% of inflation during the second and third quarters of 2023, and more than 1/3 since the start of the pandemic. Okay, do you understand that? Corporate profits drove 53% of inflation. That's something you didn't know. That's not, the thing you hear all the time. Oh my God, bro. Big government spending, bro. Leading to inflation, bro. Big government spending, bro. Big government spending is bad, bro. How many times have you heard this? You hear this all the time. That's not the problem here. He continues. In the 4 decades prior to the pandemic, corporate profits contributed to just 11% of price increases. Theoretically, this should not happen. Corporations should not be able to dramatically increase their profit margins by increasing prices because competitors should step in with lower prices and steal market share. So what's going on? Greg Ip, who writes about economics for the Wall Street Journal, suggests that corporations are collectively taking advantage of consumer psychology. Supply shocks related to the pandemic created widespread cost increases that consumers accepted. Although those supply shocks have dissipated, many businesses have maintained higher prices anyway. In other words, this isn't about the pandemic. This isn't about the supply chain. Now they're just keeping prices high because they feel like they can. Quote, if people are paying $3 for a dozen eggs last week, they'll pay $3 this week. And firms take advantage of that. Yale University economist Mike Sinkinson explained, this kind of informal collusion works best in concentrated industries. The Groundwork Collective highlights the diaper industry, where Procter & Gamble & Co. and Kimberly-Clark Corp. Control 70% of the domestic market. So this is an oligopoly, is what we're looking at. Diaper prices have increased by more than 30%, from $16.50 per package to nearly $21. This was initially driven by an increase in the price of wood pulp, a key input for diapers, but also paper towels and toilet paper. But since January 2023, prices for wood pulp have declined by 25%. But P&G and Kimberly-Clark are not reducing diaper prices. Instead, they are bragging to investors about their massive profits. In July 2023, P&G predicted $800 million in windfall profits because of declining input costs. Wow. This is why you need a windfall profits tax. In October 2023, Kimberly-Clark acknowledged that its input costs were coming down, but said that its products were still priced appropriately at that higher rate. Similar dynamics are playing out in many other industries, including new and used cars, groceries, and housing. So he continues here, how corporations are using their windfall. It's possible for corporate profits to be used productively to fuel innovation and growth, but that doesn't appear to be happening. Economist Christian Weller notes that corporations are using their record profits mainly to pay dividends to their shareholders and build up their stockpiles of cash. Between December 2019 and December 2023, non-financial corporations used almost half of their pre-tax profits to pay dividends to investors. That is the highest share of corporate profits devoted to dividends since the 1950s. The same group of corporations now has $7.2 trillion in cash, up from $6.1 trillion in 2019, adjusted for inflation. Meanwhile, capital expenditures, which is a key way corporations invest in the future, are at historic lows relative to profit. In layman's terms, they're just price gouging the shit out of you. They're just price gouging the shit out of you. In light of these record corporate profits, the government has a few choices. It could choose to raise corporate tax rates and use the funds to help people in need, such as children in poverty. In March, Biden released a proposal that would raise the corporate tax rate from 21 to 28%. Biden's proposal also includes raising the minimum tax for corporations with $1 billion in profits or more from 15 to 21%. The government could also choose to maintain the current corporate tax rate of 21%, which was established by the Trump administration in 2017 in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Trump wants voters to believe that if he is reelected, he will not prioritize corporate tax cuts. In January, Bloomberg reported that Trump plans to keep corporate tax levels unchanged in an appeal to working and middle-class voters. What a sentence that is. Stephen Moore, an economic advisor to Trump, told the Washington Post that Trump said that he really wants to focus more on small businesses and corporations, and that he's fine with the corporate rate where it is. The government could also choose to cut the corporate tax rate even further and facilitate even larger corporate profits. Trump has expressed interest in lower corporate tax rates, perhaps as low as 15%. And then they say Project 2025, that's, part of their whole spiel. So, look, what's the takeaway here? Who's to blame for the inflation? The corporations. What we're seeing here is mostly what's called greedflation, which is just, hey, we took advantage of the mass psychology of the population and the news hyping up the idea that there is inflation. We raised prices across the board, even for things that weren't actually impacted by inflation. We raised the prices because we felt like we could and we can get away with it. And then now, it's not like the raw goods that go into making a product. It's not like those prices are still high. They've come back down, but we're still charging you what we were charging before. We're still charging you at that higher rate, at that higher number. So in other words, the inflation is greedflation. And what's it going towards? Corporate profits. And it's not like they need the money, they have small margins, what are they going to do? That's not the case. It's not like they take the funds and they reinvest it in the company or look out for the workers. No. It's padding the bottom line. It's going to pay dividends. Look, I want to show you the chart one more time. Look at that chart. That's not normal. That's not okay. We need a windfall profits tax. You got to put these motherfuckers in line, man. They'll get away with whatever the fuck they think they can get away with. And if that means basically robbing the American people blind, then they're going to rob the American people blind. But this is what happens when you get a government that's basically bought and owned by the corporations, is that they're the real bosses, and that's how they keep getting away with this. So, really unacceptable stuff, but very informative article here from Judd Legum. So just remember, it's everybody else who would be the conspiracy theorist. If they say, oh my God, inflation is because of the big government spending, or even at this point, even saying if inflation is due to the supply chain. No, the bulk of the problem is just the greed of the corporations. And this is a fixable problem, but you need the will to do it. You need to actually follow through. And so just understand, this is what's actually going on. Hey y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop. And watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.